We're live.
Okay, so yesterday, if I'm recalling correctly, we left off on what is now, or that was to page 57.
Betsy James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I marked that. Not very effectively. Oh, that's because we're not yet. Section 22, I believe.
We are, yes.
Yes, okay.
Correction, section 22, yep.
Okay. So section 22. So there's no highlighting in here, so I'm not going to share my screen unless you ask me to. Section 22 is on page 57, line 5, section 22. This is an amendment to section 4010 subsection C, which is your pupil weighting statute. And it's only an amendment to subsection C, which currently requires each school district to report annually to AOE with all of the data related to student weighting categories that the agency needs in order to do its work related to education funding. Subsection C, you can see on lines, if we start on line 10, in order to fulfill this obligation, a school district that pays tuition on behalf of a resident student to a public school in another school district, an approved independent school, an out-of-state school, or a pre-qualified pre-kindergarten providers added. Current law says that the school district, the sending school district, may request the receiving school to collect this information on the sending district's resident student. And if requested, the receiving school shall provide this information to the sending district in a timely manner. There seems to be some concern over whether we're getting all of the data necessary to account for our tuition students related to the weighting categories. And so this section now requires each school district to require each resident student, I'm on line 17, in pre-K through grade 12, on whose behalf the district pays tuition, to complete a form or forms developed by the agency in order to obtain the information needed in order for the agency to compute the weighting categories under subsection B of this section for all the resident students residing in the districts and students that are educated by a receiving school. The form is required to be included with any residency verification forms or requests for public tuition funding forms required by a school district. So the pivot here is, instead of saying that a school district may request this information from wherever they're sending their students, it's requiring the school district to get this information directly from the students, essentially at the time they are processing the tuition request.
So theoretically, if the family doesn't fill it out, then it's a requirement for the child to receive.
Well, it's not that strongly worded.
Yeah.
I think every sending school district does things a little differently as far as the forms they have students filling out. There's not one universal form, is my understanding. And as you know, I'm not your field expert. But the theory behind this language is, if you are requiring the form at the same time you're requiring the residency form to prove your residency in the district, and also the form to tell the school district where to cut the check to, that the form will be filled out as kind of a package deal in that process. You do have to, school districts can require students to prove residency to show that they are residents of the district. And so at the same time that process is happening, hopefully these students are filling out, or the families are filling out the form kind of as a package deal. Moving on to page 58, section 23. Section 23 is largely legislative intent language related to special education funding safeguards. In the interest of time, do you want me to summarize it or go line by line?
I think summarize.
Okay.
Fine.
So the high level summary is section 23 is legislative intent language that it is the intent of the General Assembly to make sure that any education funding system we have, whether that's new or current, will not be construed to permit reduction in state or local funding for special education in a manner that would violate federal law, maintenance of effort requirements. So our federal special education funding has certain requirements on how much state funds, both at the local level and at the state level, are being expended and used for special education year over year. And that generally, that concept is called maintenance of effort. And so largely what section 23 does is say nothing in Act 73 or any updates you make to it should be construed to violate those maintenance of effort requirements, which would violate federal law, which would then jeopardize our federal funding. And then there is some legislative intent language in subsection B about how to fund education funding. So it's the legislature's intent on how to fund special education through that general education would be funded through a formula-based mechanism. On page 59, special education would be funded through whatever model you ultimately decide on. So supplemental reimbursement, weighted student account, or a grant model. Again, that honors our maintenance of effort requirements. Subsection C is that again, intent language that the General Assembly, it is not the intent of the General Assembly that any implementation of Act 73 would limit the students' rights to a free and appropriate public education under federal law. Subsection D prohibits a school district from implementing programmatic reductions, staffing changes, or budgetary actions that would disproportionately affect students with disabilities or impair the district's ability to meet its obligations to provide FAPE.
Who makes the decision on subsection B of section B?
Well, there's no kind of enforcement mechanism built in there. It's just a requirement to school districts. And
Okay,
I suppose if someone had a challenge to that, they could bring it to any number of places.
Thank you.
If there is a concern that there is a violation of federal law related to the rights of students with disabilities, federal law has a whole process that's spelled out for those concerns. Subsection E requires school districts to assess and document the impact of significant programming changes on students with disabilities. And subsection F requires the agency to issue guidance on implementing Act 73 in a manner consistent with this section and special education requirements. And that is it. And then page 60, section 24, we just went over this maybe Tuesday. The House passed language that prohibited tuition and fees in excess of the foundation formula. Previous versions of your amendment had removed section 24 entirely. And then we've already looked at this language that we've added back in that hasn't changed since the last time we looked at it, which is legislative intent language that under the foundation formula, it is your intent that no receiving school may charge tuition in excess of the amount of tuition paid by a sending school district if the foundation formula contains a weight for high school students.
Yes. I'd like to look a little bit more at this legislative intent here as it's written. I do have a little bit of concern, moving forward here. And just for this language, I would want to contemplate, rather than a weight for high school students, removing contains a weight for high school students, and contemplate putting in that the foundation formula is able to provide a substantially equal education. And the reason I want to explore that is, I do have some concerns for the families that are in non-operating districts that may be sending their student to a school, and the SD is paying the tuition for that school, whether it's public or private, is charging more tuition on top of what is being billed to the SD, and that individual family isn't able to afford that additional tuition. And so I'm wondering and worried about where that leaves that family in that situation.
I think the language actually does what you're looking for, I think. Once we know the weights, so the high school will be able to, we'll figure out whether the high school will have enough money to survive, to educate kids. So I think it actually does it. It's just that it requires the weight first as a trigger.
But if the weights, without adding the high school weight, which is not currently a thing, if they are able to provide a substantially equal education, is that not also reaching the goal? Because what if the foundation formula in its current form, without the high school weights, is able to provide a substantially equal education to kids? Why would we then also add, or also make the requirement that the receiving school may charge tuition in excess if, well, maybe I'm confusing myself here. Actually, Ledge Council, can you help me out here?
Yes, can you tee me up a little bit more?
Yeah,
Can I
so-
add something?
Yeah, or,
I see that you're trying to spell out as clearly as you need what gets you to support the idea that we can no longer charge tuition in excess of, et cetera, et cetera. The parents or the family should be held harmless regardless. Like, we can create whatever kind of system we want, but the question on the table is still, should a school that is accepting public dollars and near to other schools, or near to students that want to go there, should they be able to extract money from the family before enrolling that student? We could reword any part of this, but I think what doesn't sit well with folks is the idea that an extra payment by a family is the contingency on which we're saying whether or not a high school weight is necessary. These two things seem disconnected to me.
I think the problem with this section is that it was added in the Ways and Means Committee with no testimony, and it hasn't been, all the nuances have not been explored. There's been no testimony. And so it's a big change, and I get your point, and so I'm not making your point. But like, for instance, in some districts, the districts vote to give more in order to get the high schools the money that they need to be at a level that they can afford to educate kids.
Right, but that's not the family.
No, but we have to be careful about the way this is actually worded and whether that would be prohibited. And I think that we've got a lot of time to do this. And the screwing around with tuition before we actually know how much money we're talking about is really kind of dangerous
I just think you need to rewrite it.
without any, and besides its intent, that's true.
So I agree with the intent of the paragraph or the sentence. I get it. I just, my question is, why on page 60, line 8, why isn't there just a period after foundation formula? I don't understand this is all about weights. The whole foundation formula is about weights. Where did the high school student issue become relevant?
Because we know from the allowable tuition report that it costs we spent 12.1% more on high school students in Vermont last year than we did elementary school students.
Okay, so why don't we?
Foundation formula, at this point, there's no weight. And so it's a little scary to schools whether they're gonna be able to educate kids until we know the weights, and then so screw around with tuition and everything before we know what the weights are and whether they'll be able to educate kids.
Okay, so that it's not anticipated that the weights in the foundation formula will be determined by the time this bill laws.
Yeah.
But every school is scared of that. Rutland High School has tuition kids. White River
Yeah,
High School has tuition kids.
yes.
To say that they would never be allowed to charge a family more. I do actually wonder if pre-K gets pulled into this in a way that hasn't been contemplated. I was trying to ask Building Bright Futures, because we have pre-K programs in my county that run in-house a full pre-K, and they charge the families a fee. That was taken care of in it.
No, this section is specific to tuition charged under section 823, which is only for K through 12.
Okay, so that answers that question, but I don't think I can agree to anything that's written that says we're still gonna be okay with charging families and parents in excess.
I think it says the intent is no.
But only, so that's where I'm,
Yeah.
it seems contradictory almost, because we're talking about a hypothetical weight that has not been added to this, the high school student weight. And it's our expectation that the foundation formula currently will be able to provide a substantially equal education. So I think just putting the period after foundation formula makes sense.
So I think the expectation is that we don't know whether it can provide an education until we know what the weights are.
So can I ask a question of Attorney Gray? Is the foundation formula based on two different sets of per pupil cost, elementary and high school?
John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. Currently, there is no weight for secondary. As I think the answer to your question. But the thing I would caution here is that part of Act 73, as you know, commissioned a report that's being undertaken right now. And one of the requirements of that report is to examine whether or not a weight is warranted for secondary students. So conceivably, you could receive, and that's intended to come at the end of this year, a report on the foundation formula that would suggest updates to the foundation formula based on the most up-to-date information and trying to track what's happening this legislative session that could contain a revision of the weights, including a secondary school weight. And in any event, what the legislature receives is then a subject for the legislature to choose how to enact those or not.
Did you say that the report will provide information as to whether or not a high school weight is necessary?
Yes, and
And so if that is the case, then, so let's say this report comes back and it says, actually, a high school weight is not necessary and you can provide a substantially equal education, then it's setting us up for a weird issue here, a contradictory issue where we're saying that the foundation formula shall contain a weight for high school students in order to not charge excess tuition. So that's not really a question. I guess it's just a statement.
I hear what you're saying, and I defer to Beth. I take the section to be expressing intent or an expectation of what might come in the report is almost the way that I would put it, but
Here's the JFO report language from Act 73.
this is what we're talking about when you hear us reference the section 45A
yeah.
report, or when we say the foundation formula report, it's
Or the AIR study.
or
right?
the ARR study. Yep.
Right. I'm not even saying a district couldn't spend more because they have a unique offering in their area for what an independent school allows. But I truly feel it is our intent that we will not charge families more to attend a school than what is in the foundation form.
Agreed. So how do we say that?
Why don't we talk about some language? Yeah,
Stick a pin in it?
yep.
Okay, so section 25, I'm on page 60, line 11. Section 25 is an amendment to section 707 in Title 16, which is located in chapter 11, which is our Union School District Formation and Governance chapter. This is the section that governs study committee budgets, the same study committees we were talking about in section 13. If you remember back to section 13, there's a provision in there that says study committees, we're going to give you some money and a facilitator, and if that's not enough, you can revert to current law for your excess money. This is the piece of current law they would be reverting to. And what this bill, what this section does is it changes the threshold at which a study committee would need to seek voter approval for the study committee budget. Current law says if a study committee budget exceeds $50,000, all of the voters in all of the different school districts that are participating in the study committee have to approve that budget. If it's under $50,000, they don't need voter approval. The House raised that threshold to $500,000.
So what if a study committee doesn't use up all its money? Is
It's
there any
not,
mechanism to transfer that? to the
yeah,
ones
it's
who
not,
need more?
the vote is not on allocating, or it's not like a bond. It would just be approval of what the study committee believes they think they need to use. And if they came in under their own estimate, the money wouldn't be going anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, $500,000 for the single district study or the total budget?
It would be the budget for the study committee, which is made up of at least 2 school districts. Could be made up of 2 school districts, or it could be made up of 8 school districts.
That's an individual.
Entity, the study committee, yes, yep. And then the statute spells out how those, how each different school district's portion of that budget is allocated, and it's basically based on their average daily membership. So they're paying for their fair share.
Thank you.
Okay, so where that takes us to page 63. The very bottom of the page, just the section heading, section 26, small and sparse schools, the Board of Education. I'm on page 64 now. Education quality standards rulemaking. We're about to walk through several sections related to rulemaking or reports. So section 26 is a requirement that the State Board of Education update the education quality standards rules through the rulemaking process to establish criteria for identifying schools as small by necessity or sparse by necessity. That rulemaking needs to be completed on or before March 31st, 2027. And those rules should be consistent with the State Board of Education's work related to the criteria necessary to identify a school as small by necessity or sparse by necessity or both, that was presented to you in a memo dated December 17th, 2025. So the state board has already come up with criteria, which is what was required of them in Act 73, but that's where Act 73 stopped. It didn't require rulemaking to establish those criteria in some sort of formal place. So the House, instead of putting that criteria in statute, decided to have that criteria included in rulemaking.
So I thought something we went over yesterday said that we had to establish a criteria for.
Yes, that was the geographic measure, I believe,
Okay.
related. Yep.
Could this do it?
This is, I think, related but separate. Is that
Okay.
fair?
Okay,
The rulemaking for sparse by necessity and small by necessity criteria.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, these are separate. Sorry, do you want more on that, how they're separate? They are separate, and I'm happy to say more if you want to know more.
well, I'm just thinking, I'm keeping a list of stuff we need to do. If we can do it all in one swoop and not have to do 2 things,
Yeah.
I'd prefer to do it that way.
Section 27 on page 64, line 11 is another rulemaking directive, this time to the Agency of Education to update the district quality standards to establish criteria for inter-district budgeting. And the Senate has added the language under the foundation formula. And and then changed the deadline for these standards to December 31st, 2028. And the criteria is required to provide guidelines for inter-district budgeting that ensure resources are allocated across schools within each district in a way that supports the state's goal that all Vermont children will be afforded opportunities and excellent education that are substantially equal in quality and enable them to achieve or exceed the education quality standards approved by the state board. Third piece of rulemaking in section 27A is actually an amendment to section 7 of Act 183 from 2024, which was the yield bill. Section 7 in the yield bill from 2024 required the agency to update the district quality standards to include guidance for recommended reserve fund accounts. That rulemaking has not been completed yet. And so this is an amendment to that directive that extends the timeline to March 31st, 2027. Adds in folks AOE is required to consult with in this rulemaking, which includes VASBO, the Superintendent's Association, and the School Boards Association, and then provides more specificity as to what the rules shall include. And on page 6516, line 16, that includes prescribing minimum and maximum balance levels for a reserve fund, taking into consideration revenue predictability and expenditure volatility, exposure to significant one-time expenses and impact on credit ratings, specifying acceptable conditions that warrant use of the reserve fund in the period within which funds may be used. I'm on page 66 now. Establishing best practices for replenishing a depleted reserve fund, including the period over which the reserve fund should be replenished. Defining appropriate accounting terms to facilitate data consistency and improving data quality across the state, and identifying conditions that may justify deviation from any broadly applicable standards adopted pursuant to this section. Section 27B is a reporting requirement. It requires the agency on or before December 1st, 2026 to report back to you all with a giant report regarding school transportation. In the interest of time, I'm just going to summarize it. The report requires two things. It requires a bunch of information to be reported to you under subdivision 1 that includes the current landscape of education transportation, including certain data points that I'll let speak for themselves. Whether the aggregate cost of current education transportation system on a per school district basis. Let's see, transportation costs associated with the so in those aggregate costs, it's including kind of call outs for specific things. So what's the award from the state? What are the local funds spent? What's the per mile expenditures for transportation to and from CTE? What are the transportation costs associated with the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act? What are transportation costs associated with extraordinary special education expenses? And what is transportation costs associated with individualized education programs?
That's for each district
Correct.
as of right now.
Correct.
Did they did they get any input from AOE being able to do it this quick?
I have to be honest, and I don't remember.
All right. I think we should find that out for saying December 2026. That's
The report, so that's all information. And then the second part of the report is recommendations. The recommendations seem to include a geographic radius around a school within which a school district shall not be required to provide transportation for both rural and urban schools. Definitions for the terms distant students and safe walking routes. How regionalized transportation services may work under a CISA, including with a CISA serving as the fiscal agent for contracts, as well as information regarding the availability of transportation vendors in the CISA regions created in this act. How co-curricular and after-school travel could be included in the district's transportation services and what consistent standards should be proposed for such service statewide. Whether a weighted sparsity categorical grant or a per mile reimbursement model would be more beneficial to serve districts or CISAs under a foundation formula, and what the approximate difference in cost would be as compared to the current funding system. Legislative updates to the transportation reimbursement grant program, and how to ensure a student who attends CTE in a CTE center other than the student's assigned CTE center due to enrollment constraints, program availability, or some other barrier has access to transportation to the same extent as students attending an assigned CTE center as provided under current law, and then the costs associated with any such recommendations. Section 27C is a requirement that the Agency of Education develop a student profile form, which is the fancy name for the form that the sending school districts are going to use to capture the weighting information for their tuition to students. Page 70, line 1, section 27D, length of school making. This is the last rulemaking piece in this chunk of the bill. It requires the State Board of Education to adopt updates to the length of school day and year specific program requirements for public schools rule series, to update the criteria for the length of a school day. And we'll have to make a conforming change here. I see I did not catch this language here on line 6, consistent with the definition of school day contained in 16 VSA section 1141. You have pulled that definition from this bill, so I will remove that for the next draft. And that rulemaking needs to be completed on or before March 31st, 2027. Section 28 on page 70 is a repeal of section 4019 as it was enacted in Act 73. And the reason we're doing this is because section 37 in Act 73, which creates the small schools, sparse schools support grants statute, is not current law yet. It's part of the foundation formula package. And that package is contingently effective several years from now. So in order to amend law that has not yet taken effect, there's no clean or elegant way to do that.
Beth, I got a question.
Yep.
Can we go back to 27B for a second? All this data, is there a particular format that's already existing to plug this into a computer program to calculate all this? Or is that all gotta be built?
I don't know. I think that's I think that's a question for the field on whether or not this is data they already have access to. Like I don't know how easy it is to compile this information. The format of how this information is supposed to come back to you is just a report. And so it would be within the discretion of AOE on how they format.
Right, okay, so we need to put that on the list of things to do too, anticipating that it's not being done yet, so. All right, thank you.
So back to section 28, a repeal of section 37 of Act 73, only so we can reenact it in section 29 with some changes. So do you want to walk through this? Section 29. Small sparse schools grant program.
Just, would you guys like me to go through, I've talked about these pieces before, but I'm happy to make the rounded down.
One more time, we're trying to decide whether or not, so.
So just to orient where in section 28, you see the repeal of 16 VSA 4019. That is the Act 73 measure that created the small school and sparse schools support grants. And so section 29 is replacing it with these updated provisions. It is in essence the same support grants as you saw in Act 73. It does not change any of the dollar figures. But what it does is under the Act 73 measures, the determination for a small school was based on having a pupil count that is lower than 100 pupils. And so the changes that you see here relate solely to updating that eligibility condition for being a small school. Act 73 had that sub 100 pupils. And the proposal here was to switch to a more granular view and just to ask what is the average grade size, trying to get a measure that reflects, you could have, schools could have the same 100 pupils, but cover quite different grade ranges, right? So this is trying to say maybe average grade size is a more meaningful measure to get at what is actually a small school. And so that's what these updates are here for. The Big update you see is on page 71. It says that a small school means a public school that has an average grade size of fewer than 12 students and has been determined to be small by necessity under standards consistent with State Board of Education rule. To make sense of that average grade size of fewer than 12 students, you need to look back on page 70 at the updates to average grade size and enrollment. Average grade size, I hope, is an intuitive concept. You take the school's 2-year average enrollment, which is otherwise used to determine the grant that they receive, and you divide it by the number of grades that they offer above pre-K, that are operated by the school district above pre-K. And that would give you your average grade size. Note the technical change that was made maybe 2 days back to round that number downward, potentially kicking more into this bucket. And then you see the update to enrollment itself to say the number of students in kindergarten through grade 12 enrolled in the school. So it's switching from a total school count of pupils in the school to looking at the average grade size to determine whether or not a school is eligible to receive the small school support grant. It does not change the way that the grant itself is calculated.
Thanks. And the changes the House made to the statute as passed by Act 73 was that Act 73 has the State Board of Education making an annual determination. And the House changed that to the Agency of Education making that annual determination based on the rules developed, the criteria set and rule developed by the State Board. And then the last section that I am responsible for is on page 72, line 16, starting on line 16, so the language that the House passed in section 29A was an update to section 11 in Title 16, which is our master definition list in Title 16 with new definitions. You had taken that out in a previous draft and you wanted to add the class size minimum language we had been looking at in the context of the miscellaneous bill. You pulled it out of the miscellaneous bill, wanted to add it to H955. And because we had an empty section, I've just added it to section 29A. So this is the essentially clock stoppage for counting failure to comply with class size minimums towards any non-compliance consequences. So subsection B says a public school's failure, I'm on page 73, line 9, a public school's failure to comply with class size minimums shall not count towards the 3 consecutive school years of non-compliance that enables the secretary to recommend action to the state board until the foundation formula takes effect. And subdivision 2 says an approved independent school's failure to comply with class size minimums also does not count towards the period of non-compliance that enables the secretary to recommend action to the state board and that may render the school ineligible to receive public tuition until the foundation formula is in effect. Provided, however, that the approved independent school, in order to be eligible to receive public tuition during that time period, still has to meet all the other requirements that are required for an independent school to be eligible to receive public tuition. And then I think we're going to skip over a large section of the bill because it's Kirby's sections related to tax policy. And where do we go? This is the end. I didn't print out your sections.
We're in 4.1.
Yes.
Give me a second.
It's the construction.
Oh, Daphne has it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We jumped quite far. To page 124. Yeah, quite far. Section 67. I'll pause just a second. This is section 67. We're jumping to the school construction sections of the bill. Section 67 is speaking to that rulemaking authority that AOE has to conduct rulemaking on state aid for school construction. As you'll recall, Act 73 granted that authority to AOE, so that already exists for AOE. And they're also receiving the transfer of state board rules for school construction. Simply, this is just a change to the as passed by House deadline for completing this rulemaking that relates to prioritization and bonus incentives and the treatment of indebtedness in the House construct. It was March of 2027. You've pushed it back basically a year. I think theirs was March 31st, but you pushed it back essentially a year to March 1st, 2028. So giving AOE more time to conduct rulemaking on school construction a little bit in alignment with the testimony that you heard from Deputy Secretary earlier today. The next change is on page 135, and it's something that you're not going to see. The as passed by House version had a section 74 that created legacy debt aid. You heard some discussion around this earlier. I believe Senator Ron Hinsdale was having an exchange with the Deputy Secretary, and there's a question related to the cutoff date for that legacy debt aid, which in the House contract was the end of 2025. What you see on page 135 is just that legacy debt aid provision has been deleted. That previously was 100% debt aid for school construction debt that existed for school districts as of the end of last year. That's now struck from the draft. I think that may be it for me, actually. Yeah, I have just two very small things in here. I might point you toward the effective dates. Do have a highlight on page 148 related to the section 2A, but I imagine that Beth already went over this.
It's just because you added section 2A to what the House passed.
Which is those services offered effective July 1, 2027.
Any of the other new sections that you added were able to be swept in automatically into, and all other sections shall take effect.
Yep, so the way the effective dates are constructed, we do enumerate specific effective dates, but the lead-in is everything's effective July 1, 2026, unless we otherwise specify. Happy to answer questions on my two things.
Very thorough.
So we're going, as we've gone through the markup, we have one initiative we need to talk, we need to do some work on this evening. On section 24. We are open for discussion.
I'll take a stab at it, just to get the conversation flowing. I see the kind of the current scenario as being one where we're either in a kind of characterized in a different sense. It's either opt in or opt out. The current language in H955, the concept is you opt in for larger districts, consolidation of districts, et cetera, via the study committee and the town vote. That's opting in. If they get through the study committee, they get through the town vote, they opt into a larger district. The reverse is opt out, which is we give them districts, larger districts, and instead of proving to themselves that they should go in, they should prove to us, AOE, State Board of Education, legislature, that they are sufficiently self-sufficient and they can make it on the foundation formula, and we shouldn't touch it. So it's kind of a difference of perspective. And I just wanted to kind of characterize where we are right now, with a kind of a tension between opt-in and opt-out. Everything right now is written as opt-in. And that I see as a real challenge that we likely maintain in many areas status quo, and we won't achieve the scale of efficiency that we're looking for. And that to me is my fundamental dilemma in supporting the bill as it exists. Just to kind of spark conversation. And I'm not sure we're going to achieve what we have set out to do. Let's improve academic quality, get a handle on cost containment. Give ourselves the ability to take a look at facilities, programs on a regional basis. That's where I am.
Senator Heffernan.
I'll piggyback kind of on what Senator Weeks is saying. As far as like the facilitators, that I think will play a big role in how all interested parties work. I don't know if we'd entertain AOE being the facilitators because we gave them 5 positions for Act 73. And that money's already been allocated, so that saves some money right there. Plus you have people that'll be able to work on it daily and be able to work with who they're facilitating with knowing what the state's goals truly are and can work, I believe, more closely with who they're facilitating. That when they say, well, we're thinking this, and they can say, well, you know, you're not meeting the goals. What other options can we do? With the goal of, like Senator Weeks saying, if you can prove to AOE that, hey, look, we are going to be fine on the funding that we're going to get, then they'll be able to come back to us or us and the state education board and say, okay, here's the best thing that came from all of these, all this research. And I think we'd have the difference is that as facilitators, they know what we're trying to achieve here. They'll have a better sense of direction. They'll be able to spend a lot more time on it. I know that only would make us have 5 regions rather than 7. But I think that's one of the best ways for Vermont to spend their money. And we outline in policy exactly what we want the facilitators to do. So that's just an option, like Senator Weeks, just putting it out there. I think it's a good resource that we haven't thought about tapping into. I know, I'm sure Senator Hinsdale probably might have a little talk on being AOE, being the facilitators, but I think our goals, everybody, they be more main to know what the goals are.
Anybody else?
Yeah, if I can.
Yep.
So
you can.
I'm not unaccustomed to having plans handed to me, made by somebody else and said, here, make this work. But then again, I come from a different background. My concern is that if, you know, we at least have a framework with the bill that we just were presented and have made amendments to. I don't think that we have all the ingredients that we need to allow, well, for our plan of drawing lines and say, here, make this work within these boundaries. But I'm concerned about handing a plan to somebody as policy and saying, make this work. Who are we going to hand it to? Is it going to be the existing 52 superintendents to make it work? And then let them, you know, I've always been able to get feedback on my plans. That people looked realistically at what they had for resources to get the job done. They always came back and said, I can do that, but I need this, this, and this. So I think we need a period of time to give this policy to somebody and let them provide feedback, or we're not going to make it work. And we got to give them the resources to do it.
Yeah, I think aside from some concerns about section 24, which sounds like we're gonna talk about, fine with the bill as it's written. I mean, I feel like a lot of things have been said over the last couple of months, and you know, I don't know that don't need to beat a dead horse.
for clarity. Are you okay with the bill as passed from the House or as modified in the committee?
I'm okay with draft 4.1 of 946 PM. Minus
Same here.
issue 24.
I'd like to see the pre-K, not that we add anything to it. Just cut it down, that it stays status quo until we get the rest of this stuff figured out. I don't think we need to add any more.
I think the idea though, if I recall about, so I got an email about this, about the pre-K section was that it is really to set up a framework and make sure we know what we're talking about when we then go to allocate funds. And I think it actually is all only laying groundwork to make sure we have these framework we need when the time comes. And I'm not, is it, am I right that it's just framework?
Yes, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. Everything, starting on page 51, everything under the pre-kindergarten education reader assistant heading. Section 19 is just findings. Section 20 is legislative intent. And section 21 is a report of several reporting requirements. The only change to current law is in section 21A, which starts at the very bottom of page 55 and goes on to page 56, which asks for school districts to report on the number of hours pre-K students are receiving and adds Building Bright Futures to the entities required to monitor the pre-K program.
I hate to do this to you, but can you repeat that?
Yep,
In front of me.
all of it or just section
You
21A?
said, just,
Section 21A, starting on the very bottom of page 55, the substance of it is on page 56, is an amendment to the pre-K statute. It's the only amendment to the pre-K statute. And the amendments are requiring school districts to report annually on the number of pre-K hours pre-K students are actually receiving. That's data that I think we need to be able to figure out how to appropriately fund pre-K in the future. And we don't have that data yet. And then the second change to the statute is on line 16, and it adds Building Bright Futures to the entities that are required to monitor the pre-K system.
so, I'll say that for my part, I with Senator Sheen on this, I think the one thing this bill does to it, we shouldn't lose sight of this, is that it brings online the foundation formula. And that is the cost saving mechanism. And so that is here. And so that will absolutely bend the cost curve. And so the question is, how are districts going to do having the foundation formula come into being, and will they have the scale in order to manage it successfully? And this gives them every opportunity to do that by bringing in the facilitators, bringing in the facilitating discussions, talking about the fact of forthcoming foundation formula. And so I think we've had so much testimony to the effect that there is very little support in Vermont for forced mergers that I think that when we have that kind of opposition, it won't work if we try to force them. And so I think that creating the atmosphere and bringing people to the table and hoping they're capable of thinking as big as I think they're going to need to think in some instances. We have seen it happen here and there, and with parts of Act 46. And I think I have come to think that this bill and with the framework actually does provide most of what we're looking, what it does provide what we're trying to achieve, or at least the opportunity. And it's going to be up to Vermonters to decide how they respond.
I agree. Can I add one more thing? we kind of talked about it yesterday. I think the pre-K issue is kind of ancillary to the overall. I know it's education, but I think that's something that could be added to it after we get the major part of all the major muscle movements done of the reorganization. Is there some way that we can easily put that off this bill and include it later?
I think that we just heard from council that it's almost all current law. And so we'd be repealing current law to do what you are thinking. There's only one little section that's new. So I think there's not a big pre-kindergarten change in this bill.
So are we gonna count the pre-K students as a weight towards the student population?
I think that would be determined after would be determined once we actually know how many there are and how many are getting, how many hours are actually being delivered and where it's not working. And so I think that's pretty far in the, well, I don't know how far in the future, but in the future.
Because they're gonna have to make space for those students. That's from, when they were looking at their schoolhouse and
Yeah.
capabilities.
The one thing that it does reference is the fact that it's a mixed delivery system, and it actually is embracing the mixed delivery system, which means sometimes in school and sometimes in preschools or childcare centers.
Okay,
Question for Ledge Council, going through my mental notes here. Did we take out section 2B, the text
Yes.
language of, okay,
To be,
it had the language of shall avail?
yes, and that was taken out completely.
Okay.
We added the as requested to the offer.
Right.
So we have a little work to do. 24. Don't have Senator Rumpin still here. I think we've kind of hit on as far
can
as,
you summarize it for what we just agreed on? Senator Weeks had an opt-in, an opt-out. We're
Yeah.
pretty much gonna do with the opt-in, correct?
Summarize the bill?
well.
No, I think his position.
Oh.
Yes, Senator,
I'm
I won't, I'll.
Yeah, so I'll paraphrase it. I'm an opt-out guy, not an opt-in guy.
Okay,
I would like districts to prove that the prescriptive assignments are not in their best interest for the students or for the financial condition of the district.
Don't they have to do that? As it's written?
No, what I'm saying is you're in a district unless you prove that you're already self-sufficient and able to operate on the foundation point. Otherwise, you're in. So the whole bill right now is reverse headed that you need to opt into via the study committee and the town vote before you're in this larger district.
You're talking about the hypothetical ones that we drew up?
Yes. I'm just trying to clarify what Senator Williams he's kind of characterizing our positions on 955.
And I'm an opt-in, as opposed to an opt-out. For the reasons I discussed.
You can call it voluntary, involuntary, whatever you want to call it. The principles are the same. I was just trying to put it in the context of other bills that or other legislation that we passed, so I was opt-in. That's all I do.
I know what you meant.
Well, for me, it'll be now how we decide on facilitators and what we're using for lack of a better word, regions. That'll decide where I'm at.
Question on that. Somebody remind me, could Ledge Council remind me how how the facilitators are chosen?
Yes, Vermont Learning Collaborative are one operating BOCES, or CISA, would hire them. And there's certain criteria on page. Bear with me.
Saying that is giving the mind that we want everybody to do CSIS. And I want it to be open to whatever that region is in mind to do, not going in that you had a BOCES minded push, if you will.
Yeah, so you're opposed to the CSIS.
I feel we give the criteria that we're looking for. And it can be creative BOCES, not creative BOCES, but more or less, we're looking for consolidation. Looking for, are you going to be able to function financially if you decide you don't want to do consolidation on the foundation formula? Plus the, how are you going to save money down the line, sharing services or doing whatever, but that's stuff we need to, I think, do a little better job for it. I believe we can get there, but we're gotta kind of believe, what are we gonna do are we gonna stick to the 7? Who's gonna be the facilitator? I don't know. Having a school district pick out the facilitators, that's such a website.
What page?
Yep, so we're on page 31. We're back into section 13. On line, really starting on line 9, the Vermont Learning Collaborative shall employ or contract for the services of 7 facilitators. Then if you jump to line 14, she'll also hire 1 lead facilitator. And then on line 16, a facilitator shall have knowledge of and experience working in Vermont's public education system.
So Senator Heffernan, were you, might be incorrect here, but had you earlier requested or suggested AOE being the one to pick the facilitators?
Maybe not necessarily, that they already have 5 positions that we okayed in Act 73, that you'd have full-time positions that are already being paid for, that would be able to facilitate so much better, because that's their primary job to do day in and day out, rather than a facilitator that, the money we're giving them is not a heck of a lot. And I don't think we'll get as good of results as we could than if you had a facilitator that's working 5 days a week, being able to talk to all parties involved on almost a daily basis if need be, and reminding them of where we'd like to be of consolidation and just cost savings.
What were the 5 positions that were appropriated to AOE? Do you happen to know off the top of your head?
I'm sorry, say that again.
There was reference to 5 positions that were appropriated to AOE. Were those facilitator positions?
No, so that was in Act 73, and I believe the budget actually refined that, at least made them permanent. The Act 73 positions were, bear with me, section 31.
Termed as transition team or transition. something.
Yes, so in section 31 of Act 73, the agency, nope, that's not it. Where is that?
This is in the budget.
But what section is that of Act 73? 33, okay, thank you. So Act 33, Act 33 of Act 73 created 5 limited service positions, which the budget this year has amended to 5 permanent positions. And it specifies that one of them should be a business operations support specialist, one, a data integration support specialist, one, a curriculum and education quality standards integration specialist, one, learning and teaching integration specialist, and one school facilities field support specialist. I do not know where AOE is on the hiring of these folks. And it's entirely possible that the folks they are hiring or in the process of hiring for these positions would not be would not have the qualifications or expertise to be facilitators.
Yeah, I was thinking that. So I mean, there's that piece of it. There's also the other piece of it. You know, I think that as best as possible, you know, these facilitator positions should be from you know, on the ground folks who ideally already know a certain area. You know, it's people, in my opinion, I think a lot of folks around the state are very reluctant at this point when state government shows up saying, hey, I've got some ideas, you know, come along with me on this. But I do think at this moment in this education transformation process, people in their respective districts may be more receptive to somebody who, rather than being from AOE or the legislature, somebody who has that school experience and ideally is from that area and, you know, understands the history a bit. I mean, I know we can't set geographic requirement on, you know, who you're hiring, but, you know, if the Learning Collaborative, you know, it's my hope that the Learning Collaborative will take that into consideration when, you know, hiring these folks, that it's somebody who's got the background.
Yes.
So to further answer Senator Heffernan,'s recommendation, I would hesitate to essentially defund these 5 positions, convert them to facilitator positions. I think both these efforts are simultaneous efforts, to use Senator Williams' term earlier. They're a simultaneous effort. The transition team in AOE, they've got a massive workload ahead of them. The facilitators, I think, are fairly well articulated on what they do. I would keep them separate. It's just just a caution.
No one, any further discussion for tonight?
Can we discuss potentially the approach to tomorrow?
Yes. I've done a little work on section 24, and I think we're at the point of having to make a decision. Okay. People have anything that they would like to have worked on this evening already? But
Do we have any additional edits on this? Did we make any changes today that?
couple
Do you want me to go through them to see if they conform with what you're thinking?
of short.
I'm gonna collapse the report requirement language in section 13 to reflect your committee conversation today. I'm gonna await direction on section 24. Am I doing anything related to a joint legislative oversight committee?
Straw poll?
Sure.
I'm a no. As a JIDOC member, I see the handoff between the committees and the off-session oversight committees as being wonky, inefficient, counterproductive. That's just my experience. I think this is a big issue, that we need the corporate knowledge moving from the session to the off-session. And I think it would be a better effort to politic the pro tem and the speaker to dedicate funding to the committees to take us through at least this into the next session. and not stand up oversight committee.
Also wait in the process.
So is it a recommendation? I don't know, I mean, that sounds kind of similar to what the oversight committee would be. If the committees are being funded to meet once a month or once every 2 months in the off season, that is more or less what the oversight committees do, except it's the collective of, House and Senate committees.
I see value in same 6 people here, the same however many there are in the House. Finance committee, get together, periodic update, keep us all aware, as opposed to a subset. Subsets to me are just kind of like consolidations of power, and I don't think that's necessary in this regard. We're all adults. We all should be attuned to what's going on. That's just my perspective. And it's not a full-time gig. It's like you said, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once every 2 months. I think that's a small price to pay for a program this critical to the state. That's just my straw poll.
I don't know if I'm voting yes or no. I'll say I'm supportive of committees meeting on occasion, and we can call them whatever we want to call them. But to meet on occasion to be provided updates on this process.
We're not trying to wait.
I don't think you have to do that.
Yeah, this one, yeah, okay. And talking. One thing we could do, because we have a new draft, since we have a little bit of time, is go through the miscellaneous bill.
Yes.
Tracy, you got that ready for us. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
You're welcome to stay, John.
I'm happy to leave.
So fast.
Yeah. Go down.
Thank you.
And posted for Senator Williams, right?
Posting it right
Okay, Senator Williams, this will be posted for you in just a minute.
I'm gonna get my notes.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a stand up, just mute, not a real break, stand up break.
You want me to go up libraries?
No, just stay on, we're just doing standing up.
Not spending a lot of time in finance today. Oops. We're still live. This is, I just added to the extent allowed.
Oh, okay.
If you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, no, frankly.
It's pretty innocuous.
Yes.
We muted.
Yeah,
Well, we got an angry email from the principal person.
yeah, okay, that's all.
Which is funny, it's just, what's my discussion that we should have the hearing? Yeah. And 1 minute.
Stand by.
All right.
We just.
Oh, sorry, I was in finance.
So you think that's a good thing?
I'm just saying that's fine.
Yes. So your opinion, good thing?
I have a
Hey Daphne, what am I looking for that you posted?
I'm posting it now, and it wasn't on the, so just updating now.
Saying that it requires high school weights.
No, I got that. I got.
Just wanted to ask again.
It's tell you that people writer can't publish with money to fund all this.
Okay, I got it.
You on Zoom still, Beth?
Yeah.
I'm leaving,
Where you going?
going to Harper's Con.
Here.
You're still live.
We're on.
Yeah, oh,
Okay.
muted.
Okay.
So we're back on? Okay, we're back after a short break. Council Sinking is still with us, and since we got as far as we were gonna get on 9:55 for the day, I will note, by the way, that apropos the discussion at the beginning of today with Senator Gulick in here, that she just handed us another draft which adds the words to the extent allowed by law that we discussed. So it's nothing, on one level, nothing new, but just so we have it. So we thought we might as well utilize the time while we have up until 5 to look at the latest draft of the miscellaneous Ed bill, which is now 4.1. So
Thank you. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. We have draft 4.1 of your strike all amendment to the House's miscellaneous education bill, H 931. I'm just going to quickly run through the whole thing. The only change comes at the end, and the only change was removing language, so there's no new language in here. So section 1 is the approved independent school moratorium that creates a carve out for approved independent schools that are therapeutic schools that are changing ownership. And that change in ownership would trigger an initial application, which under the current moratorium says could not be processed. Subsection C on page 1, line 20, requires the State Board of Education and the Agency of Education to process that application according to applicable state law. So the moratorium doesn't apply. Section 2, starting on page 2, line 10, is the Interstate Compact for Education. This is Vermont rejoining the Interstate Compact for Education. We were a member through the mid to early 90s. We withdrew from the compact. We've been paying dues and sending commission members sporadically since then, however. This is us re-adopting the compact and becoming full members again. I believe Vermont is one of approximately 2 states that are not currently members of the compact. And so that brings us the compact language. If we keep scrolling, brings us all the way to page 14, section 3, which is the requirement that the Agency of Education conduct a background check on any employee or contractor who has the potential or will have unsupervised contact with students. Section 4.
There was a little nuance in that, just in my, we had a discussion about, does it involve anybody coming to school? The answer is no. Like me going in to speak to a class as a legislator.
It's specific to Agency of Education employees or contractors. And then section 4 on page 16 goes along with section 3 of the background check. We're adding the Agency of Education into the list of entities who are doing background checks and that this statute applies to regarding the maintenance of records related to criminal records checks. The House added all that language. You have not changed any of it. You've removed the class size minimum clock stoppage that's now traveling in H955 with your own spin on it. You've now everything we're about to walk through is language that you are in the Senate. So section 5 on page 17 is an amendment to the Intercollegiate Sexual Harm Prevention Council. We're talking higher ed here. That changes the membership and the duties of the Intercollegiate Sexual Harm Prevention Council. Do you want me to be any more detailed than that?
They all agreed. They brought us the language on that, correct? Yeah. So. Good.
Section 6 is an amendment to the hazing, harassment, hazing, and bullying prevention advisory council. Same concept. The council's membership is changed and their duties are changed in here. Do you want me to be any more specific than that?
Remind us of the difference in duties, some of the new duties.
So under current law, it's nice we have it. It's all struck through, but if you look at page 22, line 9, the advisory council is required to review and coordinate school and statewide activities relating to the prevention of and response to harassment, and they are required to report annually to you. That's the extent of their current duties. And then the amendment, the duties start on page 24. They're required to meet at least 4 times, not more than 12 times. They're required to review and advise on coordination of school and statewide activities relating to the prevention and responsement of harassment, hazing, and bullying, review the model policy, review and advise on resources for school professionals, annually solicit input from students, and then annually report to you all. And then there's per diem compensation provisions. Section 7 is the appropriation to go along with the per diem and compensation for the HHB Advisory Council. It's highlighted in yellow because the last draft you looked at had 20,000 and that number reflected the fact that I didn't count the new additions to the council membership change. And so we bumped that up to 21,000. Section 8 is the amendment to the definition of cost saving measure under the energy performance contracting statute in your school state aid for school construction chapter in Title 16 to include additions. And then that is the last substantive section, the last section of the bill. In this draft is section 9, which is the effective date. And that is because any language that was there previously that I have not already talked about is no longer there.
Questions? Yes.
I'll move that, you vote on H 931. I know that's not the right term, but I think you guys get the idea.
We'll have our, what do we have not set up, right?
No.
So let's vote, but then we can.
Yeah, we can-
You can go, you can get one, right?
Besides, our clerk is remote
Yeah.
and maybe remote for a
We'll
while.
deal with that. So let's,
Well, I think we can,
we're gonna vote.
no, but you don't have to send one to Terry. One of us could
Yeah,
do it in his
yeah.
absence.
Yeah. Was that a motion to,
So
okay,
I'm not sure what the right term is, but
okay. A motion to recommend to the full Senate
Favorable.
favorably.
931.
Yeah, okay, 4.0. We got it. This is happening.
Version 4.1.
Okay, motion has been made. So the clerk. No, actually, do we want to have him call the roll or do we want to have, no, you call the roll, Senator Williams. We'll figure out how to do it.
Okay,
Oh, you can.
Yeah. And we'll mark. as you
Senator?
go.
Senator Hashim,
Yes.
Senator Ram Hinsdale,
Yes.
Senator Heffernan,
Yes.
Senator Weeks,
yes.
Senator Williams, yes. Senator Baumgartz.
Yes. 6-0-0.
All right.
And, what's that? Oh, yeah, a reporter. Have a volunteer.
I already have a section by section summary and a side by side. So whoever is doing it, you're all set up for success.
Who from it is?
I won't be until next week or I do it.
Won't be ready for next week.
Huh? I
Won't
can't
be ready
read.
till next week.
I can't read, so.
Never stopped you.
Yeah, sure, okay.
Well,
He said he'll-
clearing the way.
He said he'll,
for-
okay.
Unless Senator Heffernan, were you, it looked like you were eager to
Oh, we
jump on.
There's nothing, we're not.
Oh, okay.
You don't need to practice?
You are such a better presenter than I, but happy.
Make sure to get it ready after my three
Okay.
this year.
So Daphne, we'll wait here, Senator Sheen and I at least will wait here. If you want to go grab. So I think, with that, we can, yes,
Question. Again, just kind of looking at the length of runway left for the committee. Did we vote out the ed tech?
no,
Do we?
I was gonna say something,
go
but
ahead.
I mean-
Go on.
Rick is preparing a draft for tomorrow.
Okay.
Didn't know when I should say that.
We'll put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Is that the last of, there's then only, that's two bills that remain, ed tech and the
And the big
Big
deal.
Yeah, those are our two bills left. Just put it
big
up.
L.
Next to the last, or the third to the last,
Yeah.
here.
I could encourage Rick to send it to the whole committee. I don't have pride of authorship, and that might give people more time to look at it before we get the committee. Or I could have him send it to me tomorrow morning and send it to the committee.
I won't have any time to look at it.
Okay,
But we
well,
walk through.
we'll just walk through it.
Walk through.
Bring your thinking hats.
So. Okay, so why don't we call the meeting adjourned?
Quick,
Yep.
on this, on 9:30, the amendment. I would like to vet this a lot longer than what we should, so I'm gonna be a no on it. Because we haven't had,
Fair enough.
this affects a lot of people, and I don't think we have enough time to bring them all in.
Should we take a straw poll on this or
You
here?
should take a straw poll.
Should we have her in? I mean,
Add her in,
because she came back with this new.
that she's handed it, because the only difference from what she presented to us were the words to the extent allowed by law.
Oh, okay. Well, I will say, she and I talked about it outside and she'd be open to a further iteration. If we didn't like this, I would vote favorably for this amendment because this is what everyone told us they are doing anyway. And I don't like the idea that we have 5,000 kids and we have no idea of anything
Well,
about where they are.
if that's the way you believe, I believe we should put the, what we took out where they, can.
The hearings.
The hearing.
I will remind
Hearing.
people, I fought for that.
I'm willing to do it if you put the hearing back in, because the parent needs to be able to have the ability to prove other than to have this happen.
Well, for now, all we have to do is just, each just say what we're thinking
Mhm.
about this.
Nothing surprising. I find the intent of the amendment persuasive. Maybe the language isn't quite 100%, but the intent is working.
Yes, and Stiller.
Yes.
So we're down to Senator Williams and Senator Sheen.
So I,
Is it 3.1 that we're looking at?
Yes. 1:42 AM or
Right.
whatever.
And
What difference are those words to the extent allowed by law?
right. Okay. Yeah, I'm good with it.
Senator Williams?
Tell me again what you're doing. 9:30?
Weeks is for it.
And we're talking about the amendment for that,
Senator Gulick.
Senator Gulick wants?
Yeah, that one. That's what we're talking about. We wanted to get a sense whether we're doing a straw poll, what your sense is,
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
and I'm okay with it.
Just to see if we can get to yes across the board. Do we have time, like Tuesday, Wednesday, to take an hour of testimony to see if we can pull us across the line?
Third reading is tomorrow.
Oh,
that's fine. I'm being the only.
Yeah, it's just a straw poll.
We, I think there's just a handful of stakeholders we talked to who, this is what they say they are doing and
I can tell you the homeschoolers do not like it.
Do we know that
We all got-
DCF isn't doing that?
well, I will say what it felt like DCF, I feel like I was trying to ask these exact questions and DCF was kind of saying, we don't do anything unless we're communicated with to initiate a hearing. So that was where we left it with the hearing. This is what they say they are doing in practice, which is communicating with each other behind the scenes. And I guess this is saying, we want to make sure that that's a requirement, not a informality. And I think it's pretty benign.
I think it's totally fine for us each to do what we want to do, but this is not our amendment, and we're just giving a sense. So why don't we go off live and we'll just wait for the form to come? Senator Sheen, and we can let the clerk's office know